Our next presentation will be coming from the Arizona Green Party, Jack Strasbourg. Jack has been an active organizer in the Pima County, Tucson area, in the general Sonora bioregion, and active on a national level with the Greens. So everyone, let's give a big hand to Jack Strasbourg.
All right, well, maybe for those people who don't want to listen to long talks, I have the advantage here because a lot of what I was going to say has already been said, so don't give me too much credit for that.
So your parents were Howleys?
No. The other thing is I noticed we have some basketball courts here, and I really would want to reach out to some locals who have basketballs at home. You know, bring a couple out here because it'd be a great way to spend a break. And the Arizona delegation, I think we got 5 people here, and we would like to, take on whoever wants to take us on.
In a non-competitive game.
Right.
Well, I don't know. I think that's the one area where competition I think is okay, is on the sports play, as long as you keep it in perspective. But we'll talk more about that later, I guess. Yeah, I want to talk kind of 3 stages here. One is to talk about some general things, and then some personal anecdotes, and then some things just that I want to talk to people, things that happened during the campaign that I thought were maybe worthwhile passing on. The first thing I really want to talk about is like when you're going to run a campaign, when you're going to think about running for electoral politics, electoral office, I think the first thing you do is you look at where the electoral politics fits into the overall Green movement and where the Greens are going. And I really don't want to, start here with the politics movement type thing. But I really think that unless you take a look at it holistically, and holistic is green, unless you look at the holistic picture and run your politics accordingly, I think that you're really missing the boat and maybe hurting the movement in the long run, although you may get somebody elected or something happen good in the short term. But once you figure out where that fits in, I think you have to take a look at what you want to accomplish. What is it that you're really trying to do with this? Because as people have said, there's a lot of resources that go into politics, a lot of time and a lot of energy. And if you're not going to get something out of it that's going to be worth that, if you could do something else, like maybe start a co-op or something like that, maybe you should do that if that's going to work. So I think you really have to figure out, is there something that you're going to accomplish by running electorally that is going to be better than what else you could do with those resources? And I know personally for me, as you may have already guessed, I'm not really a consummate politician, but I do believe in the political involvement. I do believe that politics is a tool of the movement that should be used when appropriate. And personally, my situation was that I think my primary reason for running was basically to get the Green message out. And we have 750,000 people in Pima County. I don't know, maybe, I have no way of knowing for sure, but maybe 10, 15, 20,000 people might have known who Greens were. A few other people might have thought we were Greenpeace and whatever else. So I think by running, just getting the name out there, and by attending forums and getting a few articles in the paper, there's several 100,000 people in Pima County now who know who the Greens are. And that's not just me, but the other people who ran as Greens. But that's kind of a one-time shot. You're not going to increase by hundreds of thousands the number of people who know Greens the next time. So if I was going to do it again, which I doubt, I'd have to have a little different reason. But I think there's various things, and so getting the name out was what I was thinking about doing mostly. And then of course there's policies and there's education, and I think education is really, really important. I think we did a lot of that. And then there's the notion of getting elected. And I think I really appreciated what Steve was talking about the Greens have to run a certain kind of campaign and try to deal with consensus and whatever. Because, we could be, I think, a lot more successful a lot sooner if we kind of fudged a little bit in our Green values. We could get more votes that way, and we could maybe get some people elected that way. But I really think it comes down to a long-term, short-term type thing. And I think we got to look at the long-term. And I was really particularly enheartened to find out that, Steve got appointed in this commission because of that. Because he did, he ran, apparently, at least I wasn't there, but he says he ran a pretty Green campaign. And so he actually got a pretty immediate reward. So that's, I guess you don't really have to wait for the long term to get your rewards necessarily. But I think in any case, what you do when you're running is that you run to win. And getting back to kind of the basketball or sports analogy, I mean, it's kind of like, you know, the LA Lakers taking on your local high school sometimes as far, in some races, whether a green can actually win. But that doesn't mean you don't go out there and do your best and try and play the game as best you can for whatever purpose. Occasionally you win, you know, and other times you just go out there because you learn a lot by doing your best. Plus, I think the audience that's out there, the constituencies of people, just, I don't think are going to, for the most part, are going to respect somebody who just goes out there and runs a race and then doesn't go out there and participate in such a way to make it look like they're for real and they're sincere about it. So I think that is, if you're going to do it, I think it is important that you run basically to win, even if you are pretty sure you don't have a chance. And something else I would suggest, and again, it depends upon what you're running for, what you're hoping to accomplish. Because if you want to accomplish just getting your name out, you can do that on a small budget and with maybe a little, not so much energy. But I think it's really important to kind of check the waters and check your commitment out. Like who's committed, how many hours are going to give, how much money can you get from that? Because I know in Tucson there's a lot of the, you know, not a lot of Greens are really into politics or into electoral politics, and it's until Carolyn came down, a few other people tried to, you know, organize the party. I was the only person in the entire county who even thought that electoral politics might be a decent idea, and I wasn't necessarily totally enthralled with it. So I think, and for people who are going to run, I think that's real important because, you know, we were told, you know, before we decided to run that, well, there's not that much energy out there to really run this, and if you go out there, you know, don't come to me later and say, well, you got to support me because I'm telling you right now that I don't have a lot of energy to get involved in electoral politics. So I was, you know, I was kind of knowing before it started that there wasn't going to be a huge amount of people and a lot of money out there for that. And again, I went ahead because I thought it was important to get the green name. At least people know that there were Greens in town. So I want to reemphasize that too. I think that's just real important to figure out who's going to be supporting you before you do it, or you can get real disappointed. And after you do that, I think then you have to pick your race. And I think what a lot of people have found is that it's a lot easier in a race that doesn't have both a Democrat and Republican. Basically, if you have a Democrat and Republican, like I ran in the supervisor race in Pima County, that's Arizona, and we had a real popular Republican and in a district that was slightly more Republican registered voters than Democrats. And a Democrat person who really had almost no name recognition, didn't really campaign, didn't get out status, and don't do it, then look at us and say, what are you guys doing? Where's your momentum and whatever? So, you know, Carolyn, myself, and a couple other people decided to run, and that's basically how we got picked, except that we had to go through a process. We made sure that there was a process such that the Greens of Pima County could or not endorse, you know, the candidates. We didn't have a system whereby we could stop somebody else from running, but we made it very clear to people, and there were, what was it, just two people maybe that we didn't endorse, or one? Yeah, there was, yeah, I guess one person that we endorsed, and that was really a good person, didn't run much of a campaign, and another person who was kind of known as someone that was a little bit of a loose cannon, was a nice person otherwise, but wouldn't, I guess, what we thought, bring credibility and respectability to the Green Party. So we kind of made it very clear that, yeah, you can run anyway, nothing we can do about it, but we are going to make it very clear that the Green Party of Pima County did not select you and does not support you. So anyway, we made it through that process. And I think, like Kiko was saying, I think you really have to take a look at this in terms of how time-consuming it is. I mean, it does. I mean, it takes away your life when you're doing this kind of thing. And it's, I don't know, I mean, that's just another thing to keep in mind. And I just have a few little anecdotes here. I'm having a hard time getting the mic where I can be comfortable, but one thing is, if you're going to run, make sure that you either get your own picture made and give it out to the media, or make sure that the media gets a good picture of you. Because we had a newspaper in Tucson called The Citizen, and they wrote a great article. I mean, it was the best article that was written about me the entire campaign. I mean, it was really supportive and brought out, I thought, the green message really well, and I really liked the article. And then I turned, and prior to her printing it, you know, she said, well, come by the newspaper and get a picture, because I don't know if we have a picture of you on file. So I said, you know, okay. So I would do that. And I got back to the office, and before I was going to go down there, she said, she called and said, oh, you know, I got a call from our archives, and we do have a picture of you. And I said, well, you know, I don't recall the citizen ever taking my picture. You sure you got a picture? And she's a decent picture. And, you know, I cut my hair and you know, wore a tie once in a while, you know, just, you know, for the campaign. And she said, well, yeah, they'd tell me if it wasn't a good picture. And as you all have already guessed, I mean, the picture, I'm not sure what it was, but it might have been taken at some point when we were hassling the forest ranger over a rainbow gathering or something. But it was, I mean, definitely a picture in my much more unkempt days. So that's one thing you want to take a look at. Another thing, I think, with you're dealing with the media, and this works for all campaigns actually, and I know we're talking about local, so but I'll just say this briefly, is I think you got to be careful not to say too much. In other words, when you're campaigning, not campaigning, but when the media, you're talking to the media, you know, there's this tendency to want to talk, get every idea out and keep on going. And I think you're really better off if you just say, to have about 3 or 4 things that you really wouldn't mind being aired or written or whatever, and tell them that and shut up. Because the press has a tendency to pick exactly that one comment out of 10,000 words you gave them that you didn't want printed or seen to take it. And I think another thing along those lines too, and it also goes along the lines of appearances, is that you really have to get your sound bites together. I mean, it's really, in a certain sense, not green, and I don't know, I mean, maybe we shouldn't. Maybe this is arguable. But most of your forums give you 1 or 2 minutes, at least they did in my case. And so you have to be able to say something in 1 or 2 minutes that says something. But at the same time, I think what I learned there, the people that I was most impressed by, the kind of the professional politicians people had ran, because I was running in, you know, some of the supervisors, we had some really, actually, they were kind of characters, but really good politicians. And what struck me about it is not so much what they said, but the fact that they said it in such a relaxed way. And they just came across as people who are confident and competent. And I really think that in that type of situations, you can't say much in a minute or two anyway. So you're much better off to come off as relaxed and competent than you are to try to a lot of words out there. So that's something I learned. Another thing I learned about is kind of like leadership and perceptions of leadership. You know, I had a newspaper there in Tucson that actually endorsed, I think, all the other Green candidates. And in my case, apparently, I mean, I've heard that they thought that my stand on the issues was good and my understanding of them was good, but lacked leadership qualities. And you know, maybe I do. I mean, I may not be the best judge of that, but I know all my life, whatever I've been involved in, I've always been one of the people that people look to kind of help guide or direct things. So I kind of think that probably I do have leadership qualities and would have made a good supervisor. But just because I came off differently than other people would, maybe more relaxed, maybe a little hippie-ish, I don't know. Maybe because she took me to dinner to do the interview, and I mentioned something about the idea that I sometimes eat off of other people's plates because I hate to see the food go to waste. But again, I think it's something that you have to take into consideration, is that people want new leaders. They want new types of leadership, want things to change, but their concept of what makes a leader or makes a person competent has not changed, or at least is slow to change. So you have to, I mean, somehow we got to bridge that gap of wanting a change, but yet at the same time having a preconceived notion of what leadership is. Another thing too, like in an article in a newspaper, like I have a full-time job as a computer analyst, and basically it's another one of those cases where a person can kind of twist things because I'm very active in the community and spend a lot of time doing things. He basically said, well, he says he's a computer analyst, but he's really a full-time activist. So I mean, it's kind of I mean, you just got to be careful of that, and that gets back into the thing of if you're thin-skinned and you want to get involved in a race, you have to be careful because people are going to say a lot of things about you that you would rather not have them say. Although, in my case, there was not really too many bad things. And then targeting, I think that was already discussed, so I'm going to bypass that, except I think it's really important. I think you have to do a lot of research, and I think that even though we didn't have a lot of pre-stuff with greens running, I think that there's a lot of information that we know about greens and who's likely and whatever, that we need to deal with that. And now we do have some results from races, and I think we can use that. And I think if you're interested in green politics, you're going to have to do your homework. Another thing, I think you have to be careful of new ideas. One thing I put out there was an idea that we need a new paradigm, so to speak. And the word was, well, it wasn't misspelled, but I think they used different words for that. I mean, it was hard for people to kind of comprehend, and I knew that would be the case, but I kind of wanted to start getting people used to that because I knew I wasn't going to win the race anyway. I think at some point we had to start talking these new ideas and new paradigms. So I think we do that in places where you're not really maybe on the verge of winning, where you probably don't have a chance to win. That way you get that idea out without necessarily hurting an otherwise good chance to win. At least it's a thought that we can think about. The other thing we got to think about is viewing people realistically. Like in Tucson, the homeless, it's one of my better examples. What they say about the homeless basically is that all they need is a job and a roof over their heads. Well, it's blatantly not true, but it's politically correct to say that, because to come out and say these people are not competitive in the workforce, or these people flatly are not able to function under the current system that we have for employment, is somehow denigrating people who are homeless and saying, well, they're lesser of human beings. And I think what we got to start looking at is, if you're going to deal with people in a way that may be politically correct but not realistic, you're not really going to be very successful, because unless you are realistic, you're not going to be dealing with it in an appropriate way to make that change. And I think that we have to take a look at the idea of TV advertising, and the idea that you can put a scantily clad woman on a billboard and sell almost anything you want to with nothing else going on, and realize that people spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year analyzing this kind of stuff, and they know that it works. And this is the kind of people that we're trying to appeal to. And by being politically correct and saying every human being has this lofty free will, spirit, and whatever, I mean, it sounds good, but I think, again, if you don't deal with reality, we're politically going to be stuck, with 5, 6, 7% of the votes, except for a few situations where, for whatever reason, it works. I had something else to say about that, and I can't. Oh yeah, the other thing about that is that one thing, I think the scariest thing about that is that when you're dealing with this silly advertising that works, you're dealing with a situation where many, if not most, of the people it works on agree with you that it's stupid. Therefore, we have to realize that, well, is there really that much free will in behavior? Or is behavior more contingency-based than we think? And I think we have to really take a look at that, too. I mean, this is something I don't know if I'll catch any flack on it or not, but I really think that needs to be brought out in this group, is that basically very little behavior is choice, that almost all behavior is predictable beforehand. It's kind of like going out in the street here and saying, and meeting an elderly lady who's really kindly, and saying that one of us here actually has the choice of picking up a club and hitting her over her head and stealing her purse. People will look at that as, well, you have the choice to do that, but you choose not to. And I say that's not true. I don't have a choice to do something like that. My whole system will just rebel. And it's an exaggeration, but it's an exaggeration for effect. And I think we also have to realize that it's hard for people to vote green. I know in our situation, towards the end, it looked like Carolyn might actually have a chance of winning the election. It looked like, I talked to a lot of people who like greens, but there's even people who think green when they get in that ballot box. It's really hard to pull that trigger on a green candidate. And I think one of the ways you can deal with that is kind of like image type things, like posters and things like that that actually show people, and this is kind of, again, maybe not green, maybe you shouldn't do it, but actually brainwashing people, having pictures of people putting their, whatever it is that you do to vote for a certain person, and put that image on there till it gets trained in people's minds. I mean, these are things that, you know, we got to look at to see whether is that a good idea or is that not a good idea. But I think we have to hash that out, what works and what is more green. And I think I'm getting the nod here to quit. But I had one or two things here. And oh yeah, I'll kind of finish out with this, is that one thing about running, another really good advantage of that, and particularly in my race, because I ran for county supervisor, and the county, of course, does, you know, in the county area, does the zoning, so you have a lot of your building people, your real estate people, your Tucson Business Coalition, a lot of people who didn't have a prayer of getting their endorsement because they don't see greens on their side, but really had a chance to kind of talk to a lot of these people. And what I found is that, you know, a lot of these developers and real estate people and various other people that we have a problem with are really, really great human beings, and they're really environmentally conscious to a large degree. And all they're doing is out there trying to make a living. So I think we have to take that, instead of fighting against them, I think we have to spend some time working with them more and figuring out how they can make a living without destroying the environment. And I think a lot of these people are really open to that. So I think you really get a lot of contacts in that area, and you start to talk to people, and they start seeing you as a person too. I got a letter back from the Tucson Business Coalition that said, well, you're running against a real popular candidate, and we couldn't endorse you, but we hope you continue doing what you're doing. And in fact, in most of these endorsement processes, that's one thing that was kind of interesting to me, is that it was really a cordial environment talking to developers and real estate people and business leaders. So I think, you know, we just have to try to figure out how we can bridge that gap and start talking to these people, because they're open to it and they are environmentally conscious, and we just kind of stay in our own little groups and we don't do it sometimes.